So to install a distributor, we need to be able to turn the engine over. What I'm going to go ahead and do is pull all the spark plugs out, and I need to remove number 1 spark plug, find top dead center on that anyway. So what we're going to go ahead and do is pull all the spark plugs. That way I don't have to worry about that center bolt since it's too short. Okay, so that's all the valves adjusted. Some of them were a little loose, which may have just been my adjustment, but it's always a good thing to keep an eye on. Next, we'll turn the crank to top dead center on cylinder number 1. So I'm going to use the timing pointer and look for when both valves are closed. Okay, that's top dead center, compression stroke on cylinder number 1. Now we can reinstall the valve covers and then the distributor. And I'll torque these bolts down to 10 foot-pounds. Now that those are on for good, we can reinstall the distributor. We have the crank on top dead center, cylinder number 1 combustion stroke, which means we want to start with the rotor pointing pretty much directly at the number 1 spark plug. And I'll use an oil pump priming tool to rotate the notch on the oil pump drive shaft to line up with the tab on the distributor gear. We drop the distributor in with a new seal and line it up with about this screw here and where we want the vacuum canister facing. Okay, and once we have the rotor pointing about where we want it, I'll tighten down the clamp bolt just a bit. We still want to be able to rotate it, but we want it to take force so that we don't lose our spot. And with the rotor installed, we can see that the snap action isn't bad at all. Next up, we finally have the distributor cap going on. And we'll clamp down the 4 corners of it. Down there nice and snug. We can dab on some dielectric grease to the spark plug posts. This helps prevent corrosion, and then we can hook back up all the spark plug wires. And then you drop in the rotor button, which is the spring, this little brass piece, and the carbon brush, the rubber washer, isolator, doodad, and then the coil and cap. You want to make sure you get all the wires where they need to be, and make sure the ground makes contact as well. Okay, so the distributor is installed. The last thing to do is hook up the ignition wires and the tach, and there we go. The distributor is installed. Next up, we'll get the thermostat and thermostat housing installed. I just cleaned off this and the thermostat housing, and we'll put a thin film RTV on both sides. And we'll reinstall the 180-degree thermostat that came out of this thing. Already has a hole drilled in it to help with bleeding. We let this RTV sit here and skim over for a little while, and then we drop on the gasket that I just cut, and then we can drop on the thermostat housing with a little bit of anti-seize on the bolts. And then we will snug these bolts down. I'll wipe off any excess RTV, and then after a couple more minutes, we'll torque this to spec. And then up here, we have 4 things to install. A plug, a thermostatic switch to control the radiator fans, and a heater hose fitting. All the heater hose fitting is going to be is a little bypass hose from here to here. I had a bypass like this before and it was totally fine, so I kind of just want to leave it alone. And I want to have it ready to go for when I get the heater core set back up, because I sure would like to. A 1/2-inch NPT plug like this gets torqued to 25 foot-pounds in aluminum. And the same for this 1/2-inch plug. And this 3/8-inch NPT thermostatic switch gets torqued to 20. And then the 1/2-inch NPT barb fitting will get torqued down to tight since I don't really have a good socket to fit on it. And then I'll tighten the thermostat housing bolts to 20 foot-pounds. And I'm going to go ahead and install this bypass hose right now and put just a bit of WD-40 in the inside of the hose to help get everything together. Okay, I'll tighten those a bit more later, but that's pretty much set up. And now I'm going to set up this vacuum fitting that'll go straight on the intake manifold below the supercharger. This is 1/8 inch NPT, and I'll tighten it to 90 inch-pounds. Okay, so this one fitting and this 5/16 inch barb will let us connect to a T-fitting and feed the under-manifold vacuum signal to anything that needs it now and in the future. Right now, the only thing getting hooked to this fitting is going to be the transmission vacuum line. So I'll just run a hose straight from here to the vacuum line. And I'm not going to use worm gear hose clamps for these, but I will use zip ties. Okay, with all that stuff done, I'm going to go ahead and clean up these mating surfaces and I think, hopefully, install the blower for good. I just went and sprayed this down with some WD-40, so hopefully it'll come back off if and when we need it to. And I'm going to go ahead and Loctite down these bolts as well. And the 4 blower bolts get torqued down to only 12 foot-pounds. Okay, let's torque the spec. This thing is on there. So this HEI curve kit has... Let me try to figure out where the roll pin out of that thing was put.